This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to the second edition of the Forum on Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area, Internationalization and Integration, an event organized by the CGTN think tank and supported by Hong Kong Polytechnic University. I'm Xu Qinduo. This is Shenzhen, one of the key drivers for the development of the Greater Bay Area. Another driving force comes from Hong Kong. Although closely linked to the mainland, Hong Kong has a different economic system, which is highly internationalized and features a free market, free flow of capital, and a simple tax system. So how can Hong Kong leverage its comparative advantages during the process of integration, and what are the challenges and opportunities for Hong Kong in the future? So today, we are honored to be joined by a group of distinguished guests, both online and on-site. And in the Shenzhen studio, we have Dr. Xiao Geng, Professor, Peking University HSBC Business School, and Shen Yiyang, Director, Inclusive Development and Research Center, Senior Consultant, Asia Development Bank, and Wu Haifeng, Research Fellow, Shenzhen Finance Institute, Chinese University of Hong Kong, and Michael Sun, the co-director, Fifth Think Tank Research Center, Fudan University. And also joining us online, Wilson Tung, Director, AMTD Think Tank Center of the PolyU Faculty of Business, Professor of Practice, Hong Kong Polytechnic University, and Dr. George Lam, BBS, Chairman, Hong Kong Cyberport, and Dr. Tan Ki-Ge, Chairman, Singapore National Committee for Pacific Economic Cooperation and Associate Professor in Public Policy at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore. And Dr. Martin Stu, Chief Operating Officer, Hong Kong Applied Science and Technology Research Institute Company Limited. And a warm welcome to our audience, both online and in the studio. So we start with a question we sort of touching upon last session, actually, with the further opening up of the financial sector in the mainland, for example, stock exchanges in Shanghai and Shenzhen. So Professor Xiao, there's a concern somehow Hong Kong's position or status as a financial center, somehow that will be affected. Is that the case?
Not at all. If you look at the Hong Kong stock market, particularly look at the IPO market, there are huge demands on what I call the offshore financial services for the future of China and the world. So Hong Kong is firmly the most important offshore financial centers for China.
So, Haifeng here, in terms of Hong Kong's financial status, we know that there are some sanctions imposed by the United States, and also there's a threat for the so-called special trade status. How is that, affecting maybe all the people's perception or people's understanding of Hong Kong?
I don't think the kind of the treatment or the canceled treatment, special treatment for Hong Kong, going to be going to let Hong Kong suffer a lot, because on top of that, the U.S. actually make a trade surplus with Hong Kong.
Yes.
And comparing to the Hong Kong export to U.S., actually Hong Kong import a lot from U.S. through this kind of the trade harbor of the southern China. We can look at the pre-COVID-19 and the post-COVID-19. The main situation for China trade status actually doesn't being affect a lot. So this kind of threat, because there are so many integration between the US and Chinese kind of industry. Most importantly, the supply chain, the global supply chain, actually having established between this international trading system. So in this case, even a single party try to impose a single rules or single law to against the trading partners, actually it won't work that well. So I mean, we have already see the status from last couple of years, and we can find that this kind of the imposed kind of the restriction doesn't work that well. I mean, doesn't work as planned as the Donald Trump administrations.
Right.
Yeah. There are actually more capital flow into Hong Kong because a lot of Chinese assets, they want to leave United States, like delisting, in the U.S. and come back relisting, in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is actually becomes, more important, even though, the U.S. trying to kind of making some troubles, for Hong Kong. But the fact that the tension between U.S. and China is actually creating opportunities for Hong Kong, as a offshore international market.
Yang, so if you read this media report, some media in the United States even, they would say, oh, Trump's trade war has failed. So what's your understanding of that? Is the trade war somehow blocking the progress or the growth of China, of that of Hong Kong?
Well, I think it's a trend that the whole Asia-Pacific region is going to be integrated. We have all seen the RCEP is going on. So now China is already the largest consumption power in Asia or in the world. And I think in the near future, we will see a lot of goods, products, service, and also this raw material flying from each other in Asia Pacific region. So I think if we consider capital, usually go along with service, products, and goods. So then I think we are very optimistic in the future. I mean, Hong Kong's future will be bright, as well as the Bay Area. So I think in the future, not just foreign FDI coming to Hong Kong, but also Chinese capital will move through Hong Kong and even Hainan Island to Southeast Asia, or even in the future, across the Pacific.
Michael, you are in the sector of fintech and green, technology over there. So, from your perspective, we say trade war. Many people are against the trade war because people say that's a lose-lose. Well, in business, we seek win-win, right?
Yeah, I think this is they have economic game theory involved in this, right? This is a situation where we have a predominant power, and then we have a new rising power. It's called the Thucydides trap, right? And basically, because of the zero-sum game dynamics, you have to actually be more aggressive to take out the rising power before they get too strong, right? So, and that is a function of trust, right? If you do not trust the other side and you think they're going to take over, then you have to, be very aggressive. And we see the U.S. doing that, right? The promise of the new technologies, of fintech, of blockchain, is an ethos of trust and collaboration. Actually, it's a technology or set of technologies that allow you to contractually enforce trust where you might not trust the other person, at a base state, right? So I think these technologies and new business models are ways that we can actually get to the win-win, right? It's not going to be a zero-sum game where, for example, recently it's about China, taking over most of the world because of Belt and Road, right? And that's a zero-sum game, right?
Yeah.
Where China is, U.S. is not, right? But I think the sort of more refined notion of what can happen is a win-win, and we're actually looking at that at our research center. How can we use digital finance and these new tools of innovation with digital assets, be able to tokenize a project and to split it up into little pieces, and then give benefit to different stakeholders so you can align interest and allow everybody to share in a bigger pie.
That's right. And here, of course, still somehow Hong Kong is being affected. Dr. Tan Ki-Gair, following last year's social unrest, we have this number, like Hong Kong fell 3 slots to 6th place in terms of the Global Financial Centers Index, behind Singapore. Are you worried about that?
So I think we still think as an offshore center, Hong Kong has an advantage over Shanghai or Shenzhen. in terms of professional services, whether it's in accounting, finance, or legal. Mind you, there are 20,000 Singaporeans working in professional services in Hong Kong. So I think with all this is happening now, the Hong Kong now is relatively calm, and we are optimistic again that Hong Kong will continue to serve as an effective offshore financial center for China, at least for the next foreseeable future, because the way how Hong Kong operates as a financial center in providing professional services, you do still have a leading edge compared to mainland China. So we are optimistic. So long as the Hong Kongers are not naive to think Hong Kong want to be independent, I think the future of Hong Kong must always be linked to the motherland. We wish Singapore have a motherland, but we don't have, you know. We are envious of Hong Kong. So we are optimistic about Hong Kong again.
Okay, good to listen to that, obviously. And Dr. George Lam here, if you look at the Global Innovation Index 2020, published by Cornell University and the World Intellectual Property Organization, so the Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and Guangzhou tech cluster is second only to America's Silicon Valley. However, some economists are expressing the concern that, wondering, if Hong Kong is becoming more inward-looking, more conservative. Is that a concern justified?
Hong Kong and Shenzhen is like 1 and 1 equals 11. Yeah, we are not really rivalry, whatever, because we have good things to offer each other. For example, in Hong Kong, because we have the British law heritage, and we have, very good and the best protection of intellectual property, and that is the basis for financial services and the new economy. And then we also are very safe city, stable and safe. That is important for innovation and entrepreneurship, let alone, IFC functionality. We can provide risk capital. We can, attract more investors for green finance, for fintech, for health tech, wealth tech. So I think it's very complementary. And then Shenzhen can work with Hong Kong to reach out to the Belt and Road market. I think first stop is Southeast Asia. Hong Kong has absolutely the perfect link with Singapore, for example, and we have strong link with the rest of the ASEAN region, including Indonesia, which is the largest population in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, Professor Xiao, you want to jump in?
More cooperation.
Yeah, actually, I think the problem with Hong Kong is actually it has been too successful in finance. And as a result, only finance and probably, also property sector are making huge amount of profit, right?
Okay.
But because of the constraints of physical space and also market space, so a lot of innovation, technology innovation, production is actually all across border, integrated Bay Area. So the challenge of Hong Kong is how to maintain its competitive advantage in finance, but also, integrate with the Greater Bay Area. And that's the challenge. And it looks like the Hong Kong has not been able to really managing to make that transition, which Hong Kong made in terms of the global value chain, like integration, in manufacturing, wonderful in the last 40 years. But today, in the financial sector, in the service sector, looks like a huge problem there. That's my personal view. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Professor Xiao. Here we also have Alicia Garcia Herrero, Chief Economist, Asia Pacific at Natixis. Welcome to the forum, Alicia, here. Now, you live in Hong Kong, I believe. So it seems Professor Xiao is not alone in expressing the concern, there are too much money probably. There's too much money in the real estate sector. can they somehow be diverted into, like, for example, fintech?
As an economist, I need, especially as a European economist, because we've gone through major integration into a single market. I mean, how did it happen? You basically need to allow for movement of labor and capital, factors of production. So, the minute we have that, I think it will be much easier to integrate this region. That's the first thing I wanted to say as a response to what I heard. And I think we really need to take bold measures to integrate factors of production. That in itself might already solve some of the problems because there will be some convergence of prices, real estate, for example, and which will lower pressure that Hong Kong is suffering, and that I think that's basically my answer. That convergence, it won't be perfect. We don't have convergence in Europe. Bulgaria is cheaper than Germany, even if we have much more easier capital and labor mobility. But there will be more convergence, and I think that will put less pressure on Hong Kong. You may think that's not good for Hong Kong because convergence is down, but sometimes converging downward is good if you are excessively expensive, because that, as I fully agree with Professor again, is that inhibits innovation in Hong Kong. And so that's, I think, convergence is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. What happened? You want to jump in?
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. I think there is, in terms of the Hong Kong, the advantage of Hong Kong, we know as it is the finance hub, global finance hub, as well as the top research center, because the top 4 uni in Hong Kong, which is ranked the top 100 uni among the world. But there is a lack integration between the finance and the research. Mm-hmm. For example, right, so we just did a simple research about the asset management industry in Hong Kong. The total asset under management in Hong Kong, up to the latest statistics, $4 trillion US, right? So they have money, heaps of money, lots of money, and the capital size is even greater than the combination between Hong Kong and Shenzhen. But if you look at the detail about where the money go to, where the money invested, 50% in the listed equities, right? 32% on the bonds, fixed income products, and then the money market product, and then the rates, right? So the real estate. Only 4% money go to something called the collective investment scheme, which they do the PE venture capitals, right? On the other hand, we look at the Shenzhen story. Why is Shenzhen so successful, right? Because the money, the money we collect from the investors, actually, they more care about how to invest on the good inventions, right? Good research, right? And how to make the result from research lab to the market. So we're talking about the Silicon Valley, right? So Silicon Valley, they don't have stock exchange there, right? They don't have stock exchange. All the stock exchange based in the eastern coast of the US state, right? The good thing makes Silicon Valley work because they have the enormous venture capital private equity fund. In Hong Kong, they don't have such facilities. People didn't realize that we can make the money beyond the exchange, right? Beyond the listed equity, beyond the fixed income product. So that is a big problem. So if we can extend the investment amounts, maybe double it, around 4% to 8%, the results, the position for Hong Kong technology, the development in the future will be completely different. Okay. So the integration between the finance and the research should be strengthened more in the future. That is the problem.
Yes. Yeah. Speak of that, I know like Hong Kong's FinTech Week 2020 was held early November this month with like more than 350 speakers and 500 exhibitors. So Professor Wilson Tong, what is the major carry away, from that meeting conference there?
Hong Kong is picking up very fast in the sense that our government actually very supportive on fintech development. Not just Hong Kong government, but Hong Kong Monetary Authorities, Security Futures Commission, Hong Kong Insurance Authority, Hong Kong TDC, Prohibit Council, F3 here, Cyberport here, Science Park, all have many fintech initiatives. So this fintech week actually started in 5 years ago, and I joined the past 3 years. And I find that actually it's moving fast in terms of scale and depth increasing tremendously. The scope this year, let's say, spans from digital banking, digitizing trade finance, CBDC, green finance, all the way to DeFi. And the third thing I find it kind of impressive is the focus on SMEs. And why particularly look at this? Because SME actually is important. So in Hong Kong, there are over 340,000 SMEs, costing more than 98% of business establishments, and employing about 45% of the workforce in the private sector. So the vitality and business performance are of crucial importance to the development of the economy. And if you're talking about fintech or digital technology transformation, it's very important that SMEs would appreciate the importance then to transform themselves, right? And along this line, let me say that talk about the University of Hong Kong doing this type of research, and we probably you actually launched first of its kind of, I would say in this it's the Doctor of Fintech program, and the purpose of this exactly is just want to bring in SME entrepreneurs, startups, and senior executives to come to the program to appreciate the importance of this digital transformation, right? So I think we are actually moving in a very healthy and strong way.
Ashley Alder, who is the head of the SFC, stated quite unexpectedly that Hong Kong was going to regulate all the what we call virtual asset service providers, i.e. the unregulated crypto or digital asset exchanges now fall squarely under the purvey of the SFC. And this has sent shockwaves through the industry. Okay? To answer your question, prior to this, Hong Kong was very solidly on the map as world leading for digital asset regulation, right? Outside of Switzerland and Singapore and Hong Kong, basically the top three. I think what this new announcement does, though, is really discourage digital asset innovation from coming back to Hong Kong. And you're going to see a huge movement going to Singapore, for example. And I think this is a really big challenge, right? It's the balance of well thought out, enlightened regulation, right? You over-regulate and you stifle innovation and it goes elsewhere. You under-regulate, of course, it's a bad thing, then people get scammed and you have other problems like that. But finding that balance point is very critical. And I think the most enlightened places, the places which will get traction and take advantage of this new fintech and digital asset revolution are the ones that actually find that balance point, put the sandboxes in place, allow experimentation to occur, and then follow up with regulation that's more informed and data-driven, right?
Digitalization. I'm speaking from a DCEP not long ago in Shenzhen. It's kind of like connected, exciting development, and people are looking forward to the future where everything is digital already today, actually. But DCEP probably more official, more formal. So, how do you read that kind of story development to Shenzhen, to Hong Kong, to the Greater Bay Area, Professor Xiao? Yeah.
Well, I think I have different views on this. A lot of Bitcoin type of assets does not want to central bank regulation, So we still haven't really found a way to regulate them. But on the other hand, China's digital payment actually allows, in the future, very effective regulation of the industry. So that could become the major drivers for, I think, harmonious development of offshore and onshore financial systems. The coexistence of onshore and offshore, digital financial systems. One of the worries really about the fintech and also digital finance is really winner takes all. When you create huge inequality, and you create the disruptions, to the traditional industry, right? So China has actually gone through a whole cycle with, this big tech companies. So I think we are at the like a breakthrough of the stage that in the future, a much more sophisticated regulation on fintech and also digital finance will emerge. And at that point, I think a lot of services, based on fintech, based on digital currency for small, medium-sized companies, for cross-border transactions, will actually emerge. So we are actually at a very critical time right now.
Okay, Alicia, I want to have your opinion on this development of digitalization and also mobile payment in the Greater Bay Area and also larger, as just mentioned, say in the Asia Pacific region.
Well, first, this is a very important topic because when we talk about payment systems, of course, it's related to capital movement, yeah? Because we're talking about cross-border payment systems in as far as we relate to Hong Kong. And I think while we have that already with the usual digital payment systems in China, the key is whether we will have a digital currency, that's good. But will it be cross-border? Will the e-renminbi be legal tender in Hong Kong? That's the question I have. Because that Hong Kong could be a platform for the renminbi's increasing role as an international currency, if you think about it. And I think that's a very important issue. It's not only payments, it's which currency you pay with. And this is something I think that could be a major part of Greater Bay Area. Is really the internationalization of the renminbi through its digital currency, through payment systems that are obviously China dominated, but that we have it already. The question is through which currency. So this is a very, very important topic for Hong Kong.
And if you look at, of course, the digital payment, mobile payment, digitalization, it's all big data, currency. It's all innovation, new technologies. And it has a lot to do with R&D in the city, in the region, or in the country over there. Here I have a figure like Shenzhen's from the official or the government there. Shenzhen's R&D expenditure accounted for 4.9% of its GDP last year, 2019. If you compare that to the US, Germany, and Israel, countries known for their technological innovation, their R&D expenditure is 2.8%, 3%, and 4.6% respectively. So Michael, with Shenzhen going in the direction of more and more innovative and probably more and more mobile and digital, is that somehow creating pressure on Hong Kong?
Certainly. I mean, in the sense that I think it's an opportunity, right, to latch on. I've been advising Hong Kong for quite a while, and the main message has been to connect to the ecosystem in the Greater Bay Area. Don't try to replicate it, right? It's like every time that everybody tries to do something in terms of a tech ecosystem, they want to try to recreate it. They're going to try to recreate Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley took 70 years. Okay, to become Silicon Valley.
Very difficult to recreate.
Yeah, out of a vacuum, very difficult, right? So I have always advocated to use your strengths and latch onto the engine that is the Greater Bay Area, right? You're not going to recreate all the tech ecosystem, the fundamental research, the talent base. It's too difficult because Hong Kong's too small. But Hong Kong's strength is as a window to the international ecosystem and to take that innovation and bring it to the world, or vice versa.
Okay, so Dr. Martins too here, if digitalization is a trend and all the cities, regions will go toward that direction, so what about the infrastructure, digital infrastructure in Hong Kong?
We were formed 20 years ago by the Hong Kong government. Our mission is to drive Hong Kong overall competitiveness through R&D research. We focus on information communication technology. And fintech is one of our 5 core focus. So you talk about infrastructure, yes. In fintech areas, actually, as a research institute, we work closely with the industry, banks, and also regulators. So mostly Hong Kong Monetary Authority. Now, as an infrastructure, we've been back in 2015-16, we've been launching our few white paper talk about to define the distributed ledger technology, what we know as blockchain, to lay out the scope and applications of it in Hong Kong. It's still well after. And to talk about FinTech Week this year, we also launched our a new white paper talk about alternative credit scoring for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. As we talked earlier, that SMEs, even the micro SMEs, are actually the key of the economy of Hong Kong. So using technology to help them to become more creditworthy, we leverage AI and also to kind of leveraging other forms that they can raise capital easier, banks to have more business. So going back to the infrastructure, in FinTech alone, we have not about research alone. We've been working with along this line with university in Hong Kong, for example. Last month, we've been announcing first of its kind in Hong Kong that we work with Hong Kong University to have a work study scheme of MSc in FinTech that we, together with Hong Kong U, we select admissions of students. We allowed external of them to work in.
We touched upon a little bit about the DCEP from the central bank, the digital currency. Yeah. Many people are trying to figure out what's the difference between DCEP and like I say, Alibaba, Alipay, or WeChat Pay. WeChat, it's all digital, right?
They're all digital, but Alipay, WeChat Pay are mainly talking about the payment system, right? So based on the electronic and telecommunication advantage, we fast the efficiency of the transaction. So they are not a currency. The DCEP are the currencies based on the digital. It's the digital currencies and backed up by the government's the credibilities, right? So it's representing the legal currencies in China and represent the M0 in the whole economic system. So that is different things, right? And the benefit of digital currencies, as you can see, that it can help the governments, help the central bank to make more precise and accurate monetary and fiscal policies. These days, I mean, when the money, I mean, when we make a monetary policies and make the fiscal policies, sometimes there are inaccuracy between the or incorrect understanding among the commercial bank with central bank, right? Central bank, when the money flow out from central banks, have no idea. So this is the reason why you can see after post COVID-19 in beginning of this year, although government actually spent lots of money to support SME, but eventually the property price of Shenzhen have been boosted up a lot. But we couldn't figure out why. Within the advantage of digital currencies, we can know exactly where the money flow is going to be, right? So whether the government will try to make a new policy to support SME, but instead, if the money go to the property markets or the real estate markets, we can put a red alarm there or red indicator there. So make sure that when they make the good policies, they know where the money are going to and where the money has been used efficiently by the real industry. So that is the advantage for digital currency compared to what we mentioned about the payment system.
Just want to add a point. Actually, the digital currency PBOC is creating is actually the first step. In the future, this will become an infrastructure, public infrastructure. And the Yun'ebao, all those payment system is actually private product, which facilitates transaction. So with the infrastructure, a lot more things could be done, with based kind of fairness and transparency and also regulatory, effectiveness. So that's a much more important development, I think, for the future.
Yeah, a lot of positive effects over there. But let's come back a little bit to this Great Bay Area. Here is I believe it's a survey by HSBC. It says that, I want to have this question for Alicia here. They say policy, regulatory ambiguity, uncertainty, and unfamiliarity were the main risks to the Greater Bay Area in 2018 and 2019. So Alicia, is that still the case?
In June, if I recall correctly, something like June 2019, we had more clarity because we had, of course, the Shenzhen government announcing this big plan. Hong Kong followed. So there was already more clarity than what that report shows. But the world has changed, since. We have had many events in Hong Kong, followed by a pandemic. So I actually think that we need to rethink which has started to happen. Of course, we had to visit and everything that came after. But I think, we need to think about the concept, very important concept of deglobalization, and whether you can actually integrate while others disintegrate. This is important because the type of regulation might be different. Think about open access versus non-open access. This relates to whether the world is deglobalized or not. So what I'm trying to say here is that I would agree that we need more clarity. We always need more clarity, but clarity improved in 2019. Now, the world has changed. We need to rethink, not necessarily fully change, but rethink what the Greater Bay Area means in a world that is getting more fragmented. What does it mean? I think this is a very important strategic question to ask ourselves.
Okay, so look, into the future. With this, of course, we can imagine the integration 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years from now, in an ideal situation. So what Hong Kong will be like in 10 years, for example? Anyone?
Well,
yeah.
Well, I think Hong Kong has a really wonderful, institutional environment. Mm-hmm. But the problem is Hong Kong is too small. No, not enough market space and also physical space. So the future looks great because now Hong Kong's institutional systems are rapidly replicated in Shenzhen. And also a lot of Hong Kong's practice and institutions will be used by Greater Bay Area cities, mm-hmm. and even Hainan, right? So that will give Hong Kong tremendous leverage and also space. And particularly, with the RCEP, and Hong Kong will be a wonderful platform to bridge, all the other RCEP member countries and China. So I actually have very
optimistic
views on Hong Kong's future.
Okay, Professor Wilson Toom, do you agree? Actually, Hong Kong, there's, physically you see, it's a small region, small area, but institutionally, there's a great potential for Hong Kong to play in the integration of the Greater Bay Area.
Definitely. The thing is this, in terms of this, why Hong Kong seems to be slow here is simply because the digital technology or the fintech thing, the application setting, you need to have enough space. I'm not talking about physical space, but in general, the market that for it to develop, because the one important thing for the development is for the network effect, right? So if you don't have enough people to train the network in the internet space, it's very hard for you to develop, right? So the application setting with this RCEP and the Greater Bay Area actually really helpful for Hong Kong to explore and expand in these areas. And another thing I want to emphasize is, even though we're talking about digital technology, technology is only one side. It's like we used to have this debate whether it's fintech or tech fin, right? So the idea is this, that I believe I'm quoting from famous guy saying that technology or technical oriented entrepreneurs, they are not very capable to look at the business setting and solve the pain points. So I think if Hong Kong has any advantage, it's not just the technology itself, because of this long history of international financial center and international city, that Hong Kong is very capable to look at the business setting and how to apply the technology, the digital technology, into the real setting, right? So for this, I think Hong Kong has a very bright future because of this integration into the Greater Bay Area. And another thing I want to keep talking about is that even though Hong Kong used to be just financial center or property market, but along this argument, exactly because Hong Kong has a history of property development and financial center. Now you're talking about the fintech is really putting a challenge into the financial center, right? So Hong Kong feel all these pain points, right? And then they know that you have the digital technology to help to solve these pain points, to provide a very proposition in different scenario, then I think Hong Kong could pick up very fast. In terms of property, actually, I understand actually many property developers now is very keen on the smart city type of perspective. And actually, people talk about property technology that help to move Hong Kong into a smart city. Right? So I think Hong Kong has a lot of disadvantages here.
What's wrong with making Hong Kong simply stronger financially instead of make Hong Kong go digital, go mobile payment, etc.? Does that make any sense?
Well, put it this way: Hong Kong is a 7 million people economy. We can compare Hong Kong with some small Nordic country in Europe, to say something. Would you like to depend on only one sector? I don't think that's a good idea. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, I think even today, Hong Kong's financial assets, if you put everything together, we're close to 9 times its GDP. I don't think that's very wise. I think Hong Kong needs to do more than just finance. And Hong Kong is in a wonderful position to do more than finance. I mean, yes, there's little space, yes, but it is integrating with a majorly dynamic region in the world with lots of innovation. So it should absolutely ride that wave. If not, Hong Kong could look a little bit like Monaco. You know what I mean? Like, you may think this is offensive, but because of China's sheer size, that's what it might look. So like a little bit like a place where you have a little bit of a better tax environment, more privacy, but Hong Kong can do much more than that. And I think that is important to realize now, to plan ahead. I do think Hong Kong has the universities it needs, the talent it needs to do more, but it can't become a single sector economy. It can't. This is what I call a Dutch disease. I'm sure some people agree here because they are pushing innovation and technology in Hong Kong. I can't agree more. There's very few places in the world where you have so much talent. It needs to be used. And this is for the benefit of everybody, including the Greater Bay Area as such. This is not a zero-sum game. If Hong Kong does well and it actually progresses in more than just financial center, it will be very good for the Greater Bay Area. So when you tell me about the future of Hong Kong, I want much more than that.
Wonder, do you agree that obviously Hong Kong is much more than being a financial center, in particular in the future development?
Yes, I do have a proposal how Hong Kong can better integrate with Greater Bay Area. Instead of Hong Kong trying to be a bridge to ASEAN, I suggest Hong Kong University in Hong Kong should make it part of the requirement for the students to graduate with a degree. They must do a semester internship in Greater Bay Area with those companies in China. Because unless the young Hong Kongers are interested to be integrated with China, and many of them have not been to China, so if you make it compulsory internship in order to graduate with one of those companies in Greater Bay Area, And I think that will be effectively making Hong Kong young people to put their future and the potential with the Greater Bay Area. Even in National University of Singapore, myself, I've been asking students, you want to have internship, please go to Greater Bay Area. Because if Hong Kong young people are not interested, young people in Singaporean young people are interested to link with Greater Bay Area. So I suggest, if a university in Hong Kong, you make it compulsory that to graduate, you need to have an internship in one of those tech company or even company in Greater Bay Area, so that at least they see the development in China is not as backward as what they think. I think that will be most effective, and it matters most for young Hong Kongers to be interested in Greater Bay Area, but not for the policy makers, because you cannot force the horse to drink water unless the horse wants to drink water itself. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Yeah,
Professor Xiao.
just to follow up your comment on both speakers, I think the way to think about Hong Kong is probably better to think of Hong Kong as Manhattan, within the greater New York area. Because if we look at Hong Kong just as like a smaller country in Europe, then we actually have a problem, because Hong Kong is not really a country, it's really a city. Well, it has a different legal system. That legal system, that institutional environment can be extended beyond Hong Kong, can be actually used within Greater Bay Area. So that, I think, would find a more comfortable fit and integration for both sides. That I think is probably better way to think of Hong Kong.
Well, a very encouraging note, in particular for young people, at least the Greater Bay Area points to the future for development of young people. A very informative discussion. I enjoyed it. I hope our audience also have a similar experience here. Let's give the stage to our audience, both online and in the studio. If you have any question or you want to make a comment, please go ahead and raise your hand.
I'm Carrie John, and I just graduated from Hong Kong Poly University. And I just heard Mr. Tan's suggestion that all the students in Hong Kong University can have an internship in Greater Bay Area. I think this suggestion is quite useful for us. And but I want to ask that what kind of advantage we may have, or what can we do for Greater Bay Area?
So, Dr. Tan?
Yes. I have further advice to the lady who just graduated. And in fact, this is what I told all my graduating students from Singapore. Why must you go to Greater Bay Area? For the three following reasons. First, you go there to work, eventually to work with a fintech or the high-tech company where you will get some shares as the employees, and later on when the company take off, you'll be millionaire. So the opportunity is there, that's number one. And number two, I told them, you go there and you are familiar with the Chinese system in their fintech, in high-tech, and you ask them to come to Singapore to set up the regional headquarters, and you can head those regional headquarters because you're already familiar. You are already in Greater Bay Area. You know how the Chinese work. And number three, I said, if you go to China, your Mandarin will improve. When you come back to Singapore, you outperform the rest of Singaporean graduates who never go to Greater Bay Area. So because of the three reasons, I managed to convince so many of them. And they say, no, I'm not going to New York for internship. I'm not going to Paris. I'm going to Greater Bay Area. So young people, you have nothing to lose. And you have to venture into where the growth is. I think we're excited about Greater Bay Area. These young ladies, you are so close, you just graduated from Hong Kong. If I were you, next week, I start to apply. I start to see whether I can work in those high-tech and fintech in Greater Bay Area. Your future will be bright. Young people, including those in Singapore, should go to Greater Bay Area to be part of this exciting growth. If you do that for Hong Kong, I think in maybe 10 years, Hong Kong will be more than just a single sector financial economy. And I agree with the lady, Alicia, you cannot be a single sector economy. And you will be naive to think you can be independent. You must always think of you as part of China. I wish Singapore can be part of China, but we are not. So we want to be part of your economic development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What do you think youngsters from Hong Kong somehow need to be equipped, or what kind of technology they need to be equipped to come to the Greater Bay Area?
I think the edge of students from Hong Kong, as you mentioned, originally they are already very international, and they bring along with different experience. And I see things happening in Hong Kong as what Professor Tang already mentioned, that university in Hong Kong by itself ranked top 100 in the world, 5 of them, and they already replicate this model into Greater Bay Area. They already have campus, off-site campus in GBA. They not just replicate what they do here in Hong Kong, but they do it better and faster. Governance are similar or better. So like University of Hong Kong's Science and Technology of University, all these things. So we are actually accelerating this. And also Hong Kong has a mandate to work along with companies and different members of the GBA across the border in terms of collaborations and integrations. So to me, the future of Hong Kong is bright. And the youngster, my son is at her age. I see her, and also my son has a bright future as well, and working and living in this area is blessed. So, and from a technology point of view, Hong Kong is not confined by her physical size. We talk about digitization is everywhere. Today, we are in the cyberspace. We talk from different zone, even time zone. We sit in Asia used to be leveraging the time zone differences that we can work while the American market sleeping. It's no more. Because globalization are now broken down. Regionalization or even Greater Bay Area would be the powerhouse. We are sitting in the same time zone physically with our customers and suppliers and educators all in one. And we are competing much more vigorously compared to the traditional. So competition can only drive better talent and better solutions. Therefore, I'm very optimistic.
What a discussion here. It's inspiring, and of course, we learned a lot. It's a session to learn about the Great Bay Area, about Hong Kong. Of course, the year 2020 has been marked by uncertainty, but we know that innovation fuels growth. Cooperation always produces more development. So we wish a bright future for Hong Kong and the people in Hong Kong and the Great Bay Area. And I'm Xu Qinduo. Thank you for your participation and your time. See you next time.